Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Aaron Drogo began as a fitness professional in 1997 as a personal trainer. However, his introduction to coaching, passion for movement and pursuit of performance optimization began much earlier in about 1992. He has competitive experience in not only Muay Thai, kickboxing, Golden Gloves, amateur boxing, but also Brazilian Jiu. His career led him to educating trainers in certified personal training, corrective exercise and performance enhancement. Aaron then went on to be a massage therapist before teaming up with Rick to open up ReCover NYC and the Omnia Fitness Podcast, which I'd love to talk to them about today. So my second guest is Rick Richey, and he's been in the fitness industry since 2002 as a certified personal trainer, training manager, educator of anything to do related to fitness, very well known in New York. He's also an orthopedic massage therapist, college and university adjunct professor, fitness industry presenter, as well as a subject matter expert and talent for fitness industry educational videos and written content. He's also the owner of independent training spot gyms in New York City, and along with Aaron, he is the co-owner of Omnia Recovery Fitness and Wellness Center in New York City and the co-host of their fitness podcast, Omnia Fitness Podcast. So guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's good to be on. Thanks.
Good to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on. I moved to New York about 6 months ago and seeked out a recovery studio, and no one sort of could tell me about where to go, and then all of a sudden ReCover NYC popped up, and so I rushed to your ReCover Center. It's been a long time waiting, but we finally got together. So guys, can you tell me why and how, I guess, you came up with ReCover NYC?
You want the short answer or the long answer? I'll jump in on the short answer, and then Rick can jump in, and then I'm sure I'll fill in some gaps. But the short answer is a little over a year ago, while I was training my clients at the independent training spot, we had gone on other business ventures before. We have an online video series called the Daily Move Challenge. We've had entrepreneurial mindsets together on a few other ventures. But then one day, Rick just turned to me and said, "Hey, man, what do you think about opening a recovery studio?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." And I think it was the next day we started looking for spaces with somebody who showed us a couple of different commercial spaces. And that was it. That's the short answer. Rick asked, "Am I interested?" I said yes. And then we just put one foot in front of the other.
And strangely, after we had started looking, it was about a week or week and a half when we signed the lease, and we didn't have a single investor. We knew we were going to do it. We just didn't know how we were going to do it. And we'd already signed the lease to make it happen.
We had the field of dreams approach going.
That's right.
We figured if, not build it, at least get the lease. Building it requires investors, but I guess they'll change the tagline.
If you lease it, it will come.
If you lease it, they will come.
Nice. And Rick, how did you come up with the concept, or why did you think there was a niche?
I had been working with some athletes, and I'd done some work with a company called Fusionetics, sports science, and they work with a lot of athletes. And, a big part of what they do is recovery, because the athletes have to recover before getting back on the court or back on the field. I just kind of thought, what if we had, I don't know, like an athletic training room for the everyday athlete or for the everyday person that found a way to recover from exercise or recover from daily stresses. So then I also went to a networking event, and I had tried the Normatec sleeves, and I was like, man, these are awesome. It's a great way to help the legs recover. And I knew about several other modalities like hyperized products that were out there. And we knew that there was more, and that the athletic population, even recreationally athletic population, needed a means to help facilitate recovery, because we knew that it's not the workout that gets you the benefit of the exercise. It is the recovery from the workout that gives you the benefit of the exercise.
To take it a step further, Ali, I say this in jest, but it's true. What ReCover evolved to become, it was a very selfish venture. I wanted to open a place for me. I wanted a place that had everything I needed to be the best version of myself possible. And that doesn't just mean the best athletic version of myself possible. I do need to recover from my jiu-jitsu and my Muay Thai. But I stepped back for a second and I thought, I had just finished massage therapy school not too long ago, and I had taken the state licensing exam, and I'm a father. I had gone on other business ventures before, and I realized it's not just athletes that have performance demands. Everyone has a performance demand. We've come to understand that athletes are only as efficient as their recovery programs. Then that should hold true with everyone else. You can't be the best dad possible if you're super stressed out. You can't be the best student possible if you have cognitive decline due to stress or due to lack of sleep. So we really wanted to open the doors and say, yeah, athletes are going to be our bread and butter, but for anybody who doesn't want to be mediocre at what they do, if you want to be the best version of yourself possible, we're your spot. And that means students, athletes, creative types, writers, business professionals, because they all have things that act upon them, stressors. So if we can find technologies, with research behind them, it's not just anecdotal. I think that this feels nice, but we put the grunt work into doing the research to make sure that the outcomes that we're telling people we can deliver, don't just take our word for it, but they're all research based. So we said, come on down, New York, and start doing and feeling better about everything you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I get that it was a bit of a selfish reason. I mean, it's pretty obvious that you saw the need for athletes needing to recover, as well as, of course, your own personal use. But as an athlete yourself, Aaron, I guess you realized that recovery is so important. How did you come to realize that? Is that just from knowledge or seeing people not recovering properly?
Being educators for National Academy of Sports Medicine and following that system, if you really think about what the quote unquote warm up is, the self-myofascial release, the static stretching, depending on what phase of training you're in, it's understanding inefficiencies. So you're doing assessment and you're looking for the neuromuscular and postural inefficiencies and then putting together a plan of attack. So that's always been the way we've looked at most things that pertain to athleticism or to efficiency and movement. And this was just a graduation of that. The only thing that changed was, we're not just looking at muscles and joints now, because we evolved and took it a step further and started utilizing technologies. We can start to stimulate the autonomic nervous system. There's other technologies and ways that we can, really dig deeper, but it all comes down to the same thing, which is recovery is dealing with the inefficiencies that are brought to the surface or created by stressors or stress, be them physical or be them cognitive or, what have you. And, really just finding a way to pair, the big stressors that are created and finding the best technologies out there. So it's really the way we've operated from day one. We just have much cooler tools now to do it with.
So you mentioned athletes several times, but then you also mentioned the word stress, and I feel like everyone has that in their lives. Who is ReCover NYC really for?
That's a great thing about it. We'll talk about athletes, and we do work with athletic populations, but I'd say the majority of people that come in here are regular people and they exercise, but a lot of people come in for the NuCalm, which is a restorative sleep treatment or meditation in a box. It's just a means to help shift people from that sympathetic nervous system, the fight and flight and freeze phase, and move them more into the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. People that come in and do NuCalm are people that are looking to just find ways to ease kind of systemic stress and cognitive stress and be able to get a restorative sleep treatment and spend a half an hour and get about 2 to 3 hours of restorative sleep. And we tell people this and their eyes kind of pop open and they're like, no way, is that possible? And there's nothing magic going on here. It's just physics combined with some biochemistry. And it's a simple process where we get people that would like to not be stressed into the facility. And that became one of our big sellers and one of the greatest ways to get people in here that were not athletes, because they knew that they could, especially in New York City, when you have people that are running around all the time, being busy, hopefully productive, but usually just busy. And we give them an opportunity to decompress and slow down and get some cognitive clarity.
So what's the science behind NuCalm?
So it's a 4-part system. I guess the elevator pitch is all 4 parts to the system work to take your brain waves from beta, or, in most people's cases in New York City, upper beta, to pre-sleep. So for the layperson who doesn't really understand brain waves, delta being deep sleep. From there, you go into theta, alpha, and then most of us function predominantly in beta. NuCalm uses binaural beats, which are 2 different frequencies played in a set of headphones, which isn't audible or decipherable to the person listening. You don't really know that that's going on, but it's engineered where each of your ears and your brain, every lobe and every hemisphere in your brain, are actively trying to decipher what's different in my right ear versus my left. And it's set to a frequency that manipulates your brain waves to just before deep sleep, just before delta. Now that's combined with and supported by, there's a topical or a chewable version. We always side with the topical because the chewables, different strokes from different folks, and people's palates are different. And if you don't like orange creamsicle, then you're not going to like the chewable. So there's a topical. It's predominantly GABA, which is your body's primary neural inhibitor. So right before you go off into sleep, your body releases this amino acid and it tells your system slow down. Your heart rate starts to lower, your rate of breathing lowers. Another way to look at it is it counteracts adrenaline. So you have the headphones on, you put the topical cream on, and then there's a pair of microcurrent patches that go just behind the ear. It's transcranial stimulation, which also helps to lower brain waves into that alpha theta territory. So it's a super, super low frequency. I believe it's 1 hertz. Oh, and the 4th part is an eye mask. So just
not a lot of technology in that one.
Not a lot of technology in the eye mask. But studies do show that, the removal of light does also stimulate the vagus nerve. So when you're stimulating the vagus nerve, that's complementing the parasympathetic capacities. So those 4 work in conjunction with one another to make sure that brain waves are lowered and all the associated hormones start to become balanced out. So you pull the person away from a sympathetic dominant state into a parasympathetic dominant state. And that's good for all sorts of things. So that's why athletes like it. So rest and digest doesn't just mean take a nap. Rest and digest means provide your system the environment to heal. That could mean heal muscles. That could mean benefit your immune system. There's a close parallel between stress and brain fog. So a lot of people use this for cognitive function. So in a nutshell, those 4 things work to just pull people into a more calm, centered, focused state. Athletes like it because an athlete doesn't just need to have their physical instrument. If you are mentally distracted and you're stressed out, then you can't really perform. So as far as athletes concerned, you get the best of both worlds. You get to heal up from your workout or from your training, but then you can also approach whatever your task is, whether that be a sport or returning to the office or just going home to be a more calm and patient mom or dad. That's what NuCalm does.
And it was cool because we had a pitcher from the New York Mets come in the other day, and he tried it for the first time and didn't even get to a second time. He just reached out and said, "Hey, can you help me? I just want to buy one of these things." So talk about somebody playing at a high level that finds the value of it at the first take. He definitely experienced a good result from it.
Wow. And how quickly does that, calm feeling come? Does it come straight away, or does it take several hours, or does it kick in the next day?
So typically, and Jim Poole, the CEO of NuCalm, him and his colleagues went and they did some work at Harvard and they hooked them up to EEGs because they wanted to find an answer to that question. So binaural beats aren't a new technology. I think binaural beats have been around since like 1898 or something like that.
That was very specific.
I think somewhere around there. So I said, so that could be 1897. It could be 1899. Just kidding. If you put binaural beats into your app store, there's several different companies. Now, the difference is most binaural beats are linear. So whether the frequency is set to elicit, a theta frequency, an alpha, your brain is designed to analyze, interpret, and adapt. So if it's a constant pitch or tone, your brain figures out what's going on pretty quickly and you cease to get the benefit. So with NuCalm, the binaural beats are known as nonlinear oscillating binaural beats, meaning the frequency is constantly being shifted, the tone, everything. And the way it's engineered, the first 18 minutes, those changes happen pretty quickly. And basically what it's trying to do is shake your neurology up. So your brain basically says, okay, I give up. Now, I'm not trying to figure out what this is anymore. Just do whatever you're going to do. So typically the average person, this is through some of the case studies they've done, find their way into the theta frequency, which is what we're looking to do by about minute 20. It's engineered so that the first 18 minutes basically tell the brain, just surrender. We're going to do what we need to do. Now, the cool thing about NuCalm is unlike other things where your receptors get downgraded and you have to take more and more and more to get the same benefit. With NuCalm, it's the exact opposite. The more you do it, the faster you get pulled into it and the less you need it. Your brain recognizes what's going on and the technology pulls you in faster. So I've probably done it 100 times. And it's gotten to the point now where within like 6 or 7 minutes, I get pulled in there. So, and I know with Jim Poole, when they went to Harvard, the researchers there took the EEGs off his head and said, okay, we can't use you. He said, why? And said, I guess he dropped in about 2 minutes. And they said, that's just not reasonable because it's such a discrepancy from the average person who had not used it before that it's just not giving us very valuable information. So we'll say on average the 20-minute mark, which is why we offer 30 and 60-minute sessions. So for people that are in a hurry, we'll say minimal effective dose, in 30 minutes, you should get, a good solid 10 minutes in that sweet spot where you're deep in those theta brainwaves.
How long does that then take to kick in? Obviously, the 10 minutes that you're experiencing that, you get that sensation, but then afterwards, how long does it last?
I think that varies from person to person. I mean, I have yet to have someone come in who didn't feel more calm and focused in the moment. I mean, that's like asking how long will the effects of a massage last? I mean, well, what are you doing to your body after you get off the table? If the person has a super, super high stress lifestyle, I would say it's safe to say that through to the next morning, it's at least going to last that day. But I've had people come back that say, they felt like they were walking on the clouds, felt like $1 million for 2-3 days afterwards. Everybody's makeup is different. I mean, we've got people that are type A personalities and people that are a lot more chill. So, I mean, if you're prone to be stressed, you might need it a little bit more frequently. But an athlete that beats up on their body might need deep tissue massage more frequently. So it really depends on what your stressors look like coming into the facility and what they look like going out. What does your follow-up care and approach to life look like?
One of the other things, too, is that we know that people tend to sleep better after they do NuCalm. As a parent, we oftentimes say for young children, sleep begets sleep. So to make sure our kids get their nap and then we know that they're going to sleep better throughout the evening. It's similar for adults as well. So when they get this restorative sleep treatment and they come and do NuCalm, then for the most part, they sleep better that evening. And again, being able to sleep better allows them to wake up and be more refreshed and not so immediately and regularly pulled into that sympathetic nervous system as their day begins. So they wake up more refreshed and more relaxed, and they can hold on to it for a little bit longer. So Aaron's right. It doesn't mean that aggression is in your lifestyle. It just means that there's a heightened sense of stress, whether that's the noise on the traffic or being on the subway in New York City. That's just part of the life here. And I think that's also why NuCalm has become such a valuable tool for us and what we offer is because people just realize that living in a city that never sleeps, it's nice to go somewhere and get some sleep.
Absolutely. And can you tell us about the space machine that you have as well? It looks and sounds like a space machine, but I believe it does a lot more than that.
Yeah, when we were unloading it from the truck, there were some people that were walking by and one guy goes, "Is that what Superman arrived to Earth in?" And we were like, yep, that's it. That's the one.
We actually said no, it was Robin Williams in Morgan.
Yeah.
And then he instantly realized how old I was.
Yeah, right. The CVAC stands for Cyclic Variations in Adaptive Conditioning. It is an egg-shaped pod. I tell people just as an introduction to it that it's a decompression and recompression chamber. So you go into this chamber, this pod, and it's going to take atmospheric pressure off of your body. There's going to be transient hypoxia, and hypoxia just means low oxygen. So this transient state of low oxygen as air is removed from this pod, and not completely, but it's taking air pressure off of you. But then what it does is it immediately puts the air pressure back on you and then takes it off of you again and back on you. So it's kind of like this yo-yo effect of pressure, compression and decompression. The interesting thing about it is that it tends to stimulate certain things in your body that help with recovery. So one of the ways that I like to describe it is if we're at 72 degrees and at 0 feet, so we're at sea level, we have about 15 pounds per square inch of atmosphere compressing our body. If we get up to 23,000 feet, which is virtually how high you are going up in this pod, then you have about 6 pounds per square inch on your body. So it takes a lot of pressure off of you. As it recompresses, it puts that atmospheric pressure back on you. So as it decompresses, the cells in your body expand, the cell walls start to expand. It allows for kind of built up waste products that aren't moving as needed. So they're supposed to move in and out of your cells pretty regularly. Your intercellular fluid, your interstitial fluid, there's supposed to be this constant cleansing of that. As it recompresses, it strengthens the cell wall. It stimulates the mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cell, produce ATP, which is the body's currency for energy. And so we see this presumed spike in mitochondrial biogenesis simply because the outcomes that we see in the research and the data that's out there from the peer-reviewed articles are increase in VO2 max, which is generally how we identify how well people utilize oxygen. So it's a means of measuring somebody's fitness. So it helps to increase VO2 max, increases the body's ability to uptake and utilize oxygen. There's a decrease in one of the studies of pre-diabetic men, and they were able to utilize and metabolize glucose better. And we also see that there's a study in chronic pain sufferers that they only did it 40 minutes a day for 5 days. And they took 3 different pain scales. There was a placebo group and an intervention group, and the intervention group had significantly decreased pain on their pain scale. And of course, the control group didn't have any change in their pain whatsoever. So it's pretty remarkable tool. I'd say of all the things that we have at ReCover, the CVAC is the granddaddy of them all.
Sure.
It stands.
It's the center.
Yeah. It stands center of all the other modalities that we have, especially because its ability to facilitate recovery and increase fitness, which I think is pretty cool because you sit inside this cool space pod and you can answer emails or get on Instagram and increase your fitness level.
And going back to what we opened with earlier, Ali, which is, recover no longer means athletic recovery exclusively. That also means cognitive function, stress management. As the atmospheric pressure is changing, not only are you seeing the effects on a cellular level, but it's also moving lymphatic fluid. It's moving the lymphatic system. So it's circulating cerebral spinal fluid. So you're removing metabolic waste from the brain. So that in turn also translates to a boost in cognitive function. That also translates to a boost in sleep quality. Mm-hmm. So we're covering all buckets that we set out on with this as well. So it's a really exciting tool for us.
It sounds amazing. So you mentioned one of the studies that was only 5 days, consecutive days, I assume. What about with VO2 max? Have you personally seen a change, and then how long does it take to get that change?
So I can jump on this one quickly. So the 2 research studies that covered the athletic benefits were out of University of Stanford and University of Hawaii. And the average increase for the elite level athletes used was, I believe, a 5.2 or 5.7% increase in VO2 max. Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of them was a 5 times per week, 40-minute sessions for 6 weeks. And the other one was 3 times per week, also for 6 or 8 weeks. They were decent lengths of time. That's the research, and I tend to only quote research, peer-reviewed research. However, we have UFC fighters coming in. We have professional Ironman athletes. My personal anecdotal evidence that it worked, and virtually every single one of them that has come back tells us that they set their personal record in my bike time trial, in my run. Every single time, we have one guy, John Joseph, who comes in, who recently was on Joe Rogan podcast, and he's getting ready for Ironman Kona. He keeps checking his device to me because he thinks that, it's got to be broken, because every single time he's using it, he's setting a new PR, a personal record for his runs and for his swims. As far as minimal effective dose, we don't have any research on that, but I can tell you anecdotally, professional athletes that are using it. And for me personally, over the course of opening this place up and other things in my personal life, I wasn't doing any cardiovascular work at all. I wasn't really working out at all. And I decided just to throw myself to the wolves. We're right next door to the Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and MMA school. And I figured, you know what, I'm going to have fun and I'm just going to just jump right in and do it. And I did a private Muay Thai session. And I assumed that this was going to be the best and worst experiences of my life. I haven't done any cardio. So I was working with my coach, PJ McMahon, and I'm a boxing coach and a Muay Thai coach, so I understand pacing. And I remember thinking in the moment, we were moving at a pretty fast clip. We kept it a standard 3-minute round. And by the end of every round, I was sucking wind through a straw, and I kept thinking, I'm going to quit. I'm going to stop. But within 15 seconds of the rest, I realized I'm standing up straight. I'm breathing through my nose. And by the time the minute rest was over, I'm ready to go. I feel like this is the first round over and over again. And at the end of the session, I asked, just out of curiosity, PJ, were we moving at an honest pace? He said, Aaron, we're moving at a fight camp pace. And I held up and I did a full hour workout. And I hadn't done cardio in probably 6 to 9 months. But what I was doing was CVAC. I come in and I use the CVAC for 40 minutes a day, 5 to 6 days a week, depending on if I'm working on the weekend, and just by doing that, and I have experience, I understand how I typically respond to that pace. I know how many rounds I can typically finish. I know what the quality of those rounds feel like. And it was a different human being throwing punches and kicks that day.
Wow. And so a lot of our listeners are athletes, and if they had a competition coming up, whether it be an MMA competition or even like John, an Ironman competition, John, for example, going to Kona, how many weeks out would you recommend he start? And then I'm assuming you're sort of suggesting a 40-minute session 6 days a week.
I think some of those research studies, especially in the one in Hawaii, were 40-minute sessions 3 days a week. And I can't remember, it's 8 to 10 weeks that we were there. So I'd say 2 to 2.5 months out is what you'd be looking for. 40 minutes a day, 3 days a week, which works well for us and some of the athletes that we work with. So the MMA athletes generally have a 6-week to an 8-week fight camp. And we'll sponsor some of the pro fighters in their fight camp. They kind of get the recovery that's seen in the literature when they start their fight camp and they start incorporating us into their programming. So I would suggest that if any of the folks that are your listeners are in New York City or in other areas where they can find a CVAC machine, then it seems to be a cellular trainer that helps the body work more efficiently and give you a little bit more battery life.
And Rick mentioned that we sponsor some athletes. For the average person in New York City who has a competition they're getting ready for, we really want to be their support system. So for somebody that knows that they will dedicate the time to being here, we did create a special package for the CVAC that takes the unit price to a level that's conducive to spending that much time here. We want to make sure that we're giving back to the community as well. For somebody who's coming in, once every couple of weeks, it makes sense to do the a la carte pricing. But if you have an event, if you have something in your life that's dictating that 3-4 times per week for several weeks is in your forecast, we definitely make it a point to work with those athletes and those people to make sure that we can do our best to accommodate their budget and help their outcomes.
And for example, we have the New York City Marathon is going to be coming up in a couple of months, and we have a couple of folks already who are coming in and starting the process of the CVAC training to coincide with their high mileage training for their marathon. And as they start to increase their mileage a little bit more, we're already getting people in that are training, because it's not the marathon that you have to recover from. It's the training of the marathon. Yeah, that's the hard part. And,
absolutely. And what other services do you offer that they'd be using?
That's great too, because the amount of impacts that legs are going to be taking as people train for their marathon, and it's not just marathon training, but because that's what's coming up. If somebody tweaks something in their foot and ankle or their knee, we have some means. And I always tell people that at ReCover, we're somewhere between foam rolling and physical therapy. So if you foam rolled a little bit and it's still not getting better, but you're not quite to the point where you need to go to physio, then come and see us. We have a Game Ready unit, and Game Ready is a dual threat when it comes to fighting against the tweaks that happen, especially in things like running, where it creates compression, similar to some of the other compression sleeves that you'll see. But inside the Game Ready, if we do a wrap for your ankle, or you kind of do a mild strain on your calf, then it will hug and squeeze. But inside that unit that is hugging and squeezing you, the sleeve, there's a tubing or a webbing of tubes inside of it. And those tubes are connected to a reservoir of ice water. And so this ice cold water now is filtering inside of the sleeve. So as you're being compressed, you're getting cryo at the same time. It's a moving cryo. So what happens is that water, as it moves faster throughout the webbing of the sleeve, it maintains this incredibly cold ice water. And then if we slow how fast the water filters through, then the water actually gets a little bit warmer, so it doesn't stay as cold. So we can adjust the temperature a little bit. But if you've ever heard of RICE, which is rest, ice, compress, and elevate, which they'll say a lot of times when you get an injury, to add that into your programming, then using a unit like the Game Ready provides you rest as you're staying off of it. You are putting ice on it, compressing it, and you kick back in one of our lounge chairs, so you elevate as well. So you get a nice little recovery experience while here.
And I've seen some of your clients make the most of their time by doing that at the same time as NuCalm.
They might do the Normatec. Doing the ice cold, the Game Ready is probably, you're not going to be able to get in the zone with the ice water hugging you.
Ice water and parasympathetic dominance are two great tastes that don't go great together.
That is true. But things like the Normatec, which is just the air compression, so without the cryo attached to it, so you've got this air compression. That, Allie, is delicious, and people will sign up for that for sure.
It's like getting a nice leg massage while you're doing your NuCalm.
It's like a
very
hug,
relaxed.
And everybody likes hugs.
Is there much scientific evidence around the compression side of things in terms of peer-reviewed studies?
Yeah, there's some that are showing things like the movement of lymphatic fluid. So when you have swelling in certain areas, you're going to see an increase in the movement of that fluid. When it comes to the peer-reviewed research, there are some that give it a nod, and there are some that say that it's not. So what we do is we just kind of bounce back and forth between the idea that there's some things showing benefits of the air compression and some things when it comes to the peer-reviewed research that may not, or that it might be similar to movement at a low tempo so that people are still getting fluid moving through their legs. So what we did is we said, well, there's some positives in the research that show benefits, and there's some that don't show benefit. But at the same time, anybody who has ever done a run and then after the run had their legs hugged by this air compression sleeve, there's one thing that they all walk away with, which is that felt amazing. And it's kind of like some types of massages. They may not last very long, but they feel fantastic. And sometimes you just deserve that.
Excellent. We're very well aware of the benefits of your Sunlight and Sauna. We've actually had the CEO of Sunlight and come on, so we don't need to go into that. But I'd like to know a bit more about your 3D body scan, because I haven't seen many of those around.
The Fit 3D is what we use, and we like it, but we think that eventually as we move forward, because it's not a recovery modality, that we'll slowly phase it out. As it currently stands, it's just a means of using infrared light, much like the lights that are used in the sauna. It's just how they work with the cameras, that they're able to take detailed photos. And from those photos, and what I mean by that, it's just a light measurement, can tell what's the diameter of your arm and your chest and your abdomen and your hips and your thighs and your calves. And you can see discrepancies from one side to the next. It gives an estimation of body fat, and it does a postural analysis. So for us, when we got it, because Aaron and I are both fitness professionals, we thought, well, this would be a great way for us to use it with our fitness clients, but also be a great way to get other fitness professionals in here to use the Fit 3D as a means of sending their clients our way to do their measurements. And while they're here, to look around and go, hey, what is this place? And then we can talk to them more. Well, hey, you're working with a personal trainer. Recovery is probably valuable to you. So we just drove business to recover by using the Fit 3D. But as the recovery business is taking off, then we'll probably end up using that space for actual other recovery modalities at this point.
And what other sort of modalities do you think might come out in the future?
Well, Allie, we're glad you asked. One of the things that we're inquiring about is what it might be like for us to get a whole body cryo in here. And that's one thing that is just hard for us to do because of our facility and where we are in New York City. It makes it hard to get nitrogen deliveries, but we like the idea of the whole body cryo. So we're doing some research on what that's going to look like and how we can make that happen. One of the other things that we're looking at is another game ready unit. It uses the same thing that we talked about before, where the ice cold water was filtering through, except it's an iceless version of that. And it can do what's called contrast bathing. So when you put these sleeves on, within 1 minute, it can go from 112 degrees down to 38 degrees. So you can get this heat, and then you superset that with the cold, and it can go back and forth, providing this contrast bathing. And the contrast bathing actually has shown some pretty good results when it comes to facilitating recovery and muscular pain.
Excellent. I look forward to that. In fact, our gymnastics studio, all our coaches are very keen to come and try it out. My business partner came to check you out secretly and was very impressed. So we look forward to recovering. Aaron and Rick, is there anything else that we haven't spoke about that you think our listeners should know about?
Yes, why your business partner didn't give us a hug and say hello.
Yeah, right.
I think we covered all bases as far, I don't think we need to talk anymore about the technologies. I've said it several times. I just want to put a bow on it. Recover isn't about the what or the technologies. It's about the who, when, and why. So it's not just about come in and use this tool. It's who are you as it pertains to what do you do in life, work, and play? And let us find the best ways to pair the technologies we have. People have structure to their resistance training program. People have structure to their cardio. Most people have structure to their nutritional approach. We think that the same thing should hold true with recovery. Understand what outcomes are you seeking? Are they neuromuscular? Are we looking more at stress management? And people wear different hats on different days. You might be an athlete on Monday, but you're just a stressed out mom on Tuesday. Come in and have a conversation with us. And we'd like to really pair the technologies to whatever it is you're looking for. But beyond that, we like to give mention to the Omnia Fitness Podcast with Rick and Drogo. I almost went into our full blown open. Sponsored by Everlast. The only way for us to describe it is a broad stroke approach to all things fitness, wellness, and athletic that after 20 years in the profession still keep us enthusiastic, that inspire us. So we might have a martial artist on there. We might have a registered dietitian on there. We might have somebody who's a meditation practitioner on there. Things that after this long in the game, I think the average lifespan of a personal trainer's professional career is somewhere around 1 or 2 years. So if we're the outliers with almost 20 years and we're still finding a way to be enthusiastic and find inspiration, we think that that's worth bringing to the general population because we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot. We find this a really fun platform to bring those people on. And every once in a while, it's just Rick and I having, sometimes more detailed scientific conversation.
Can you tell we're in New York City? Do you hear the sirens going on in the back?
Yes, we can hear those.
Oh, there's
excellent.
a party going
on. They knew the conversation was heating up, so they're sending in the squad.
Yeah, I can see
the
that.
hoses are coming out.
We'll definitely put a link to your podcast and episode 1. I totally recommend to find out more about these two geeks. Before I let you two geeks go, I just have to ask you a bit of a personal question, and I guess, Aaron, I'll start with you. Do you have a tattoo?
Well, most of my friends are tattoo artists, and there's a saying, you start with one and you end with one, which is the route I'm heading. Aside from the anterior portion of my legs, I think every extremity on me is covered. I mean, my hands are tattooed, my chest, my stomach, my back, arms. I'm on that start with one, end with one path. So yes.
So you've got one.
Got one big one.
Yeah.
Rick, what about yourself?
No tattoos. My grandfather had tattoos, and he kind of scared us from ever getting one, and he'd show us his tattoos, which were ridiculous, that he got in the military. And he was like, this is what happens when you're young and stupid, and you get these, and then you get married, and constantly somebody's asking, who's that naked lady on your forearm? So
you avoided tattoos and women?
I avoided women tattoos, that's for sure. And then I remember somebody said, well, you get posters and hang them up in your room. You can always take them down later. I thought, well, that was good for me as a young man to hear. And I ended up not going down the path of body art. However, I greatly appreciate it. When I look at the artwork on Aaron's forearms, which I get to see a lot of, I think it's pretty incredible, and I'm not opposed to getting one in the future. It's going to have to be real special if I do it.
I disagree, though. I think that your body is a work of art.
Oh, thanks, Aaron. Very special. We just had a moment.
Well, I'll let you two go and sort that out between you two. I know time is of the essence for you, so thank you again for coming on the show, and really appreciate your time and look forward to recovering with you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ali.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.